Oh, the Told You So Twitter account is in effect at Good Take Finder, our brand new Twitter account, which exists only to subversively retweet and remind all fantasy gamers, sports fans about my hot takes that came to fruition. That's the reason it exists. We will cloak it in general good takes from all around the internet, but there will be an inordinate number of Podfather takes and Podfather associates, Nate Liss, Marcus Mosier, associated with this Good Take Finder account. Just you watch. Sure enough, today, here I go again with another good take. Nailed it. Dirk Cutter announces that Peyton Barber will be the starter at the beginning of the season. This was shocking news to so many fantasy gamers drafting Ronald Jones in the 5th round of fantasy drafts. He's not even the starter. How could you draft him in the 5th round if he's not even the starter? It was just assumed they drafted him in the 2nd round. He must be the starter. Yeah. They drafted him ahead of Darius Guice. Must be a starter. No, he was the worst running back drafted in the 2nd round by far and away. I'd much rather have Kerryon Johnson, Nick Chubb, Darius Guice, all these players so much better than Ronald Jones. And yet Ronald Jones drafted confidently. I'm just not sure why fantasy gamers aren't drafting Ronald Jones earlier. That was the analysis, right? Mike Clay just hopes that the Ronald Jones enthusiasm stays controlled, right? Stays suppressed so that he can draft all the Ronald Jones. But we told you, what good is Ronald Jones? What is this guy? I mean, somebody explain this to me. He can run in a straight line fast. He's a sprinter. And he plays running back like a sprinter would. Imagine a sprinter playing running back. Well, that's how Ronald Jones plays running back. Creates very few yards on his own. It's not elusive and does not catch the ball effectively. He only can do this one thing, which is run in a straight line very fast. And that's it. He can't even stay healthy. He can't even complete the workouts without straining a hamstring. We didn't hear that disparagement of Ronald Jones that he can't stay healthy. That's reserved for Alshon Jeffrey and Marlon Mack and players we like, right? Players we like where you get the injury discount. I mean, wheels up for Peyton Barber. Getting Peyton Barber at the end of drafts. Those days are over. The moment the head coach comes out and says, this is our starting running back for week 1, you can't get that player in the last round of a draft anymore. It's over. I already have him everywhere. Scott Fishbowl. Ding. I mean, there's not that many early drafts, right? The way too early drafts, other than, MFL 10s and, drafting in the draft app. I'm not going to share those drafts with anyone. But the drafts I have shared, the big one was the Scott Fishbowl, and there's Peyton Barber, the Podfather eating his own dog food. We talked to Alex Dunlap about it. I don't love Peyton Barber's skill set. No one would love Peyton Barber's skill set. This isn't a skill set that inspires. He's not fast, he's not explosive, and he doesn't catch the ball well. I mean, I just described a lesser Ronald Jones. Well, sure, I'd rather have Ronald Jones at his ADP. I don't hate players, I hate ADPs. Even in high-stakes leagues, Peyton Barber's been going outside the top 150 players. where Ronald Jones is going inside the top 75. That's the difference. It's not about the players. It's about the ADPs. Peyton Barber has been one of the best values throughout this offseason. This is what we've been saying. And then the good take finder, which is controlled by the Podfather, finds the take written by the Podfather and retweets the Podfather. Ha 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 ha! And you can look for more takes that came to fruition from Ben Gretsch and Eric McClung and associates of the underworld. They will be featured on this Good Take Finder Twitter account. Told you so. But what we do like about Peyton Barber is the size-adjusted agility, and it's the size part. It's the 32.7 BMI, 92nd percentile, juxtaposed with Ronald Jones' sub-10th percentile BMI. And then you layer the athleticism on top of that. So when you layer Peyton Barber's 11/21, 69th percentile agility score on top of his size, when you size adjust the workout metrics, he's much more impressive. And when you size adjust the Ronald Jones athleticism, he's much less impressive. This is what we're talking about. All you need is one trait that we can point to say, okay, this player has the requisite nimbleness or ability to break tackles at the NFL level that he can succeed. That's what we saw with Alex Collins last year. And Peyton Barber is now the Alex Collins in waiting for 2018. The between the tackles grinder from the SEC who is limited, right? This is a limited skill set. Peyton Barber has nice agility and he can grind out yards between the tackles. Alex Collins has tackle breaking ability and not a lot else going for him. You go put Alex Collins out in space. That's not how you win in the NFL, by putting Alex Collins out in space, by throwing passes to Alex Collins. No, this is not a David Johnson situation in Peyton Barber, right? Or Alex Collins. These are one-dimensional backs, but if they're used in a workhorse role, they can be RB2s in fantasy and help you win your league. That's why you go out and get Alex Collins, especially in a dynasty league when he's undervalued. His ADP and redraft is now about where it should be. But Peyton Barber is being drafted 10 rounds plus after Alex Collins. So Peyton Barber's a much better value. Peyton Barber has been a must-draft player. We had 2 must-draft players at the running back position in the double-digit rounds. It was Peyton Barber and Jordan Wilkins. And it's hard to believe how much Jordan Wilkins I have on my teams. I did not expect to have this much Jordan Wilkins because I also love Marlon Mack. But if Marlon Mack is being made available to me in the 7th and 8th rounds, I'll push the button, and I'll happily stack Jordan Wilkins on top of him 5-6 rounds later. You're not investing a lot to monopolize the majority of the carries in Indianapolis, an ascending franchise with Andrew Luck. They just revamped their entire offensive line and drafted one of the best run-blocking offensive linemen in the history of the NFL draft. Right? I mean, by some accounts, the highest graded guard in NFL draft history goes to the Colts. Okay? That happened. So that offensive line is going to be a lot better, and especially at run blocking. So it makes sense that the entire team will become much more efficient, score a lot more points with Andrew Luck under center, and you have the additional benefit of the offensive line. So again, we have inexpensive assets in that backfield. Why not draft 2? And if you were drafting Ronald Jones, I sure hope you drafted Peyton Barber. I really do. His agility score is impressive. And you also pair that with the 30% dominator rating. So he also, not only does Peyton Barber have at least one size-adjusted athletic trait that's exciting, he also was a proven performer at the college level, the ability to absorb a big workload. Like, that's a trait that's what you're looking for in an early down grinder role. And that role was wide open in Tampa. And clearly, based on the Dominator rating and just his size, Peyton Barber was teed up to capture that role. And sure enough, it's August 13th, and he's already won the job. Fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. Why not? Why not Peyton Barber? That's the problem. Get enamored by fast players drafted with early round draft capital, and whoever else is there on the depth chart is just dismissed. That's what happens. And we saw this again in Washington. And this is where I need to listen to my own analysis. My first instinct when Derrius Guice went down, and that's really what the conversation needs to center around today, is the Derrius Guice injury. And I left for a weekend outing with my family. We went to Vermont, and I didn't have a chance to get in front of this microphone and really break down the fallout from this Derrius Guice torn ACL. And I apologize. And we're dropping a show tonight. It'll drop 6 a.m. on most of the podcast listening services, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And it was a show I recorded with Nate 5 days ago before the Derrius Guice ACL tear was confirmed. In fact, I think Derrius Guice went down while we were recording that show. So there's no talk of the latest news, the thing that everyone wants to know. What's my take on Derrius Guice? That's not even in the next show. The next show hasn't even come out yet. It's not going to come out until Tuesday. And there's no analysis of the Washington running back depth chart on this upcoming show. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing a Backstage Pass today, is to let you know what's coming for the week. So we have that show coming tomorrow. That's exciting. We have an interview with Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders. So Aaron Schatz is a great guy, and he is one of the OGs in the football analytics world, and I'm excited to talk to him. But we're not going to talk to him as much about individual players as we are positional trends and team trends. So that's more going to be the focus. We've had a couple of those types of guests. Think Warren Sharp, that look at the game from a more macro perspective. They're less fantasy focused, and therefore the questions aren't necessarily, what do you think of player X? We don't do contrived dichotomies in a fantasy draft. Who do you prefer at this particular ADP? I don't even know if Aaron Schatz understands what the ADP notion is. I don't even know how involved he is in fantasy football. We're going to get a lot out of it. And then we're going to talk to Michael Fabiano. That's right. Michael Fabiano is going to be on the show. It's amazing. I know it's exciting, and I know some of you think, well, you've criticized Michael Fabiano in the past. Yeah, I've criticized all analysts. You guys remember how much I criticized Evan Silva? And now Evan Silva is one of the greatest friends of the underworld. I criticized J.J. Zacharyson. I thought he was unfair to Derek Carr after his rookie season. And I said, you're wrong about Derek Carr's prospects in the NFL, and you need to be higher on him going into his sophomore season. And I think that was something that it was a blind spot that JJ had with a small sample trap, just basing the analysis on one professional season, and also the general variance of the quarterback position. So clearly, since J.J. Zacharyson eviscerated Derek Carr, and Raiders fans, I don't think J.J. has experienced that type of vitriol from a fan base since his Derek Carr hit piece. And we came on this program, the Mind of Mansion show, and I disagreed, and I laid out my case for Derek Carr. And just like we disagreed with Evan Silva about David Johnson. Remember that? And so with all these analysts, Matthew Berry, Michael Fabiano, Mike Clay, I am looking forward to the opportunity to have these guys on the program and talk about players and find places where we can disagree and maybe shine a light on a fallacy that may be widespread that a particular analyst is helping to propagate. Maybe we can shut that down, shut that noise down. Who knows? That's the whole point. And I welcome every analyst that has a following, every analyst that has a platform to reach a large swath of fantasy gamers. I want them on the program because it improves our reach. And we can learn from them, and they can learn from us. So I do not, just like we don't hate players, we hate ADPs, I don't dislike any fantasy analyst. I just disagree with opinions. That's the difference. That's why we don't do any name-calling on the show. We just argue with positions. And sometimes we use humor, right? We do impressions sometimes. Christopher Harris, Sigmund Bloom, all of them, all of these analysts are welcome on the show. At any time, I would love to re-engage with Christopher Harris, for example, and to have him become a friend of the underworld. Why not? Why not? I don't hold any grudges, man. I hold no grudges. I am all about love. Peace and love, man. As long as you don't take yourself too seriously. That's the caveat. And I'm getting the impression in talking to Michael Fabiano offline that he doesn't take himself too seriously. So that right there, and that's the key, right? You don't take yourself too seriously, you're welcome on the program. And even someone who does take themselves too seriously in a Christopher Harris, I would welcome him on the show as well. Doesn't matter. So that's what we have on the docket for this week. Strong lineup of shows. Boom, boom, boom. I think the Fabiano show will actually come out before the Aaron Schatz show. Sometimes I record the Sonic Truth, but it doesn't actually come out until after the Mind of Mansion show. And I'll at least ask Michael Fabiano for his take on the Washington backfield, because what I'm hearing about this Washington backfield doesn't make sense. That they're screwed if they just roll with who they've got, right? They've got a satellite back, a one-dimensional satellite back, and Chris Thompson. He cannot absorb a 50% opportunity share. He's not built for that. We've seen him injured plenty to know that the diminutive Chris Thompson simply does not have the stature to absorb a significant workload. Who is going to be the Peyton Barber of this Washington offense? And at first I thought, well, it has to be Samaje Perine, right? It has to be, because Samaje Perine has the draft capital, was drafted at the 407 last season. So early fourth round pick, that's significant draft capital. And while he only ran a 4.65 at the combine, when you weight adjust that, because he weighs 233 pounds, and 99.7 speed score, and his best comparable player on Player Profiler is Jordan Howard. And if you remember his time in Oklahoma, he commanded more carries than Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was a second-round pick, and a late second, early third-round pick in fantasy football leagues this year. Too high, I might add. So Perine, in his own right, competing with Joe Mixon, still posted a 27.8%, 57th percentile dominator rating. Wow. So if you have that speed score with that dominator rating and a 6.0 yards per carry, that's all between the tackles, right? So you have an impressive yards per carry and contextual production. I talk about contextual production. Samaje Perine didn't post a 27.8% dominator rating at Tulsa with the backfield to himself. No, he did that at Oklahoma, sharing a backfield with Joe Mixon. That's what we talk about when we talk about contextualizing the production. So impressive production, impressive efficiency, and nice size-adjusted speed for Samaje Perine. So to me, this is the easy call. If I'm Washington, I'm going to put Samaje Perine in that starter's role and essentially plug him into the Derrius Guice role. And he'll be worse, but he won't be so much worse. And when we talk about analytics, analytics are probabilities defining possibilities. When you look at the stickiness of running back efficiency year to year, it tells you that the added value of running backs, what a running back brings to an offense, the efficiency above expectation, right? The per carry output above expectation for even what we would consider the most talented running backs, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley. With Sean McVay. So exciting. That their wins above replacement, right? I know that metric doesn't exist in football. I know people are working on it, but essentially their wins above replacement, what this running back is giving you on a per carry basis, a per touch basis, above and beyond the replacement level running back in the league, even for the best in the league, it's not that high. It's not that much different. What a running back delivers on any given carry, whether it's Jordan Howard or Le'Veon Bell or Spencer Ware, the differential's relatively small. And of all the running backs around the league, Chris Thompson was giving you more on a per-touch basis than any other running back in the league last year. So if you already have Chris Thompson and you just need to replace the between-the-tackles grinder role with a moderate talent, a replacement-level talent, well, you're not screwed. You're not... It's not worst case scenario for Washington. Their offense is going to go along just as it was before. Derrius Guice is not a significant difference maker on a per down basis. He does not significantly impact overall offensive efficiency. This is the reason why drafting a running back in the first round was asinine. It's why the Sony Michel and Rashad Penny picks were unforgivable. And it's also why the Saquon Barkley pick, as good as Saquon Barkley is, it was indefensible to pick him in the top 10. If there was a running back you could argue was worth a first-round pick, it was Saquon Barkley this year. But not top 10. I mean, get out of here with top 10. Maybe bottom 10 in the first round. I would argue Saquon Barkley, worth it because of what he brings in the passing game, because of his incredible ability to win in space in the passing game. That would be the argument for drafting Saquon Barkley. So, losing Derrius Guice is not a death blow to the Washington offense. That's the point. It's a negligible effect on their offensive efficiency. It sounds crazy. It's so contrarian that you would think that, because Derrius Guice is this generational talent at running back, and yet, though it is a major downgrade from Derrius Guice to Rob Kelly, Samaje Perine, whoever's next on that depth chart, it's just not that impactful. For fantasy football, we just assumed that Samaje Perine, because he has the most impressive college resume, should be next in line. But the problem is Washington released its official depth chart. And the backup was listed as Rob Kelly, which is understandable. He's the veteran, right? He gets the deference. This is what we always talk about. It's not a meritocracy in the NFL. It's a seniorocracy. It's whoever's been there the longest gets preference. So Rob Kelly on top of the depth chart made sense. But then the next running back on the depth chart was not Samaje Perine. And we're going to update the depth charts on PlayerProfiler.com shortly. I mean, it's one of the great resources, one of the underutilized resources of PlayerProfiler.com are depth charts. PlayerProfiler.com/depth-charts. And those are updated constantly. And we'll be updating the Washington backfield shortly. And we will account for the official depth chart released by Washington. And Samaje Perine's not in the top 2 running backs because it goes Rob Kelly and then Capri Bibbs. It's Capri Bibbs. It's not, I repeat, it is not Samaje Perine. And this is what I was afraid of. I was drafting in the Apex Fantasy Football League, and I had it on auto pick because I'm not an asshole in a slow draft. I respect my fellow drafters, and I go with the auto pick mode instead of asking my league mates to wait for hours until I'm ready to get behind a computer and actually draft. But the one downside is if you put yourself on auto pick, if there's this crazy news like Guice tears an ACL and his backup is available, you may have missed your opportunity because it wasn't just parked on your draft slot waiting for you to pick. And I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't gone on auto pick. I would have drafted Samaje Perine. And then in the back of my mind, I thought, well, I needed a wide receiver that round anyway. It looks like in a PPR league that Cole Beasley is going to be an incredible value. That's who I ended up drafting. Oh, well, sure enough, depth chart gets released. There's no Samaje Perine in slots 1 or 2. Well, technically, slot 1 is Chris Thompson. So Samaje Perine technically is in slot 4 on Washington's depth chart post-Derrius Guice. He was the 5th running back. The argument is that Samaje Perine, had Derrius Guice not been cut or injured, Derrius Guice would have been cut. Right? If you're the 5th running back coming out of camp, you're cut. It's over. And Capri Bibbs looks a lot like Samaje Perine. They have very similar workout metrics. I mean, shockingly similar. It's just that Capri Bibbs is 15 pounds lighter. If Samaje Perine were 15 pounds lighter, he would look exactly like Capri Bibbs. I mean, it's shocking how similar these guys are. These are big producers at the college level. They're both prolific and efficient runners. Low college target shares, so we're not active in the passing game in college. Have upper percentile bench press numbers at the combine, and then bottom percentile numbers across the board in the other workout metrics. That's Capri Bibbs. Well, that's also Samaje Perine. So the difference between Samaje Perine and Capri Bibbs is just size. And if Capri Bibbs has more experience and he's become a better pass blocker, for example, more reliable, he's a harder worker, he has those intangibles, well, that would be enough, right? You would think that would tip the scales. If what Samaje Perine has going for him is 15 pounds, and what Capri Bibbs has going for him are all the other intangibles that coaches look for, who do you think the NFL coach is going to pick? The older guy with the intangibles is Capri Bibbs. So if you're in a deep league, a deep dynasty league, you need to go get Capri Bibbs. In fact, even in a deep redraft league, it's worth picking up Capri Bibbs because who knows? He could be on the verge of usurping Rob Kelly. We don't know how close that competition is between Capri Bibbs and Rob Kelly. We just know that Samaje Perine has a lot of work to do. And that just picking up players And drafting players based on a draft capital, that is the worst move. But in general, the idea of just drafting players based on their prospect profile as opposed to the signals the team is emitting, you're better off going with the smoke signals from the team than you are just picking the player that has the best prospect profile on paper. If it were me, I would probably lean toward playing Samaje Perine if I'm Jay Gruden, but I don't run an NFL team. These coaches don't have access to PlayerProfiler.com, and if they do, they're not paying much attention to it. They're certainly not in Washington, unless they did. Maybe that's the reason they drafted Darius Guice. Oh, mind blown. And what do we like about Rob Kelly? When you go to Rob Kelly on PlayerProfiler.com, you'll notice something interesting. The college target share for Rob Kelly is over 11%. So while Bibbs and Perine weren't catching any passes at all in college, there was Rob Kelly soaking up an 11% target share. Rob Kelly has soft hands and runs clean routes out of the backfield. He does. He's much stronger in space than Perine or Bibbs. This means Rob Kelly is the back to own after Chris Thompson, and it's not even close. Part of the reason it's not close is because the next guy is Capri Bibbs, an undrafted running back with subpar athleticism, is next on the depth chart, not Samaje Perine. This just strengthens the hand of Rob Kelly. The case for Rob Kelly is strong. The case for Samaje Perine is weak. And I was prepared to come in front of this microphone today and talk about how Samaje Perine's the back to own. And then I actually sat down and I did my due diligence. And I looked at the data points that suggest which direction the team is going to go, and the data points suggest it's Kelly. And knowing that the running back position is not only disposable, that it is fungible, it's all the more reason to go with Kelly. That the argument is, well, Samaje Perine in a vacuum is just better. But the counter argument is, well, it's the running back position. It's fungible. It doesn't even matter. The yards above replacement that Samaje Perine can deliver over Rob Kelly is negligible. If this were a different position, if this were the wide receiver position, it'd be different. Then the prospect profile has more meaning. But because running back is fungible anyway, you're better off just interpreting the signals the team is emitting, and in this case, they're saying it's going to be Kelly. Now, Chris Thompson is not 100%, and he said he won't be 100% until November. And there are very few actionable takeaways gleaned from training camp reports, but that was one of them because that was something that the player volunteered that information. And that's very rare that a player will volunteer information about an injury, especially if it's not glowing, right? If it's positive, usually the player's happy to share it. If it's negative, you'll never hear a word about it, except in this one case where Chris Thompson was more honest than he probably should have been, right? Not in his best interest to share that information, that his leg's not 100%. Who does that serve? It certainly doesn't serve Chris Thompson. But looking at this running back depth chart, it brings me to another running back on this Washington team. It's Byron Marshall. Byron Marshall looks like an electric satellite back. He really does. He has the upper percentile agility score, and he was a wide receiver at Oregon. This is what we want, right? The former wide receiver turned agile space back in the NFL. Well, that's Byron Marshall. He looks a lot like James White. He's not only best comparable to James White, it's a close comparison. It's just that Byron Marshall played wide receiver and James White played running back at the college level. So Byron Marshall is a name to know, because if something happens to Chris Thompson, then Byron Marshall not only will take over 1-for-1 the satellite back role, but because the other running backs on that depth chart are replacement level or below, I believe there will be more plays called featuring the satellite back in Washington. It's why, based on the law of the conservation of opportunity, Derrius Guice getting injured helps Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson's ADP should rise. His opportunity share should rise. So the theoretical opportunity share for Byron Marshall, should he get an opportunity, also rises. Mind blowing.